Last week we talked about the unit circle. Unit circle is a circle with radius 1 centered at the origin. Unit circle is a circle with radius 1 centered at the origin. So the equation is x squared plus y squared is equal to 1. If you notice on the last test you had to write an equation for a circle. Well, here's part of the reason why. Who can tell me what this coordinate right here is? What's that coordinate? 1, 0. How about this coordinate? 0, 1. This coordinate? Negative 1, 0. And this coordinate here. Good. Everybody okay with that? Here's something that you learned this past week. You learned that if theta was 30 degrees, then the terminal point was the root of 3 over 2, 1/2. Do you remember doing those type of problems? If you can't come up with that terminal point, you are behind. And we should make sure that you get caught up to that idea. Otherwise, this next test will go very, very, very poorly for you. I promise. Good news is, if you don't know how he came up with the root of 3 over 2, 1/2, I will show you again today. Fair enough? So every terminal point has an x, y value. We interject certain ratios that are extremely helpful to us in solving problems involving angles. And so we have this thing called the sine of theta, otherwise written as sine of theta. If you say sin instead of sine, I will scream at you. Call it like it is. It's sine, not sin. Sine is actually equal to the y value divided by the radius. What is the radius in the unit circle all of the time? So therefore, y over r becomes just y. Do you see that? So for example, the sine of 30 degrees is 1/2. Don't do this, but to make my point, watch. I'll go to my calculator. If I type in sine of 30 degrees and I'm working in degrees, I get 1/2, 0.5. Now, how your calculator comes up with that, that's very complicated. It involves a lot of calculus 1 and calculus 2. I can share some of that with you at a different time. Right now, just note that that's what we're doing. The cosine, don't say cos. You're taking trigonometry. My daughter Tenley's in kindergarten. If she says cos, I get it. I'm proud of her. She knows C and O and S. Good for her. She's learning her alphabet. You guys say cos, you're wasting my time. Say cosine. Cosine of theta is x over r. And since the radius is 1, x over 1 is just x. So cosine is your x value. So can somebody tell me what would be the cosine of 30 degrees? What's the x value of my coordinate? Root of 3 over 2. Tangent. Now, I'll give you a break here. If you say tan, all right. Got it. But tangent is equal to y divided by x. Cosecant is the reciprocal of sine, CSC. And the reciprocal of y is 1 over y. Secant is the reciprocal of cosine. And we write it as that SEC. Secant of theta is equal to 1 over x. Cotangent, COT, is the reciprocal of tangent, so it's x over y. We'll get you confused, and then we'll get you unconfused. Okay? Let's start with the basics. We are not going to do all 6. We're going to do 3. Okay? We're going to do sine, cosine, and tangent. We'll practice the first one. Calculate the exact values of the trigonometric functions given the value of theta. First off, I convert it to degrees so we understand what type of angle we're talking about. How do I convert pi over 6 to degrees? What do I multiply it by? 180 over pi. What cancels? Pi and 180 over 6, 30. So we're talking about a 30-degree angle here. I'm going to draw my circle. What is my other angle? I have a 30-degree angle. 60 would be the other angle. So I have a special triangle. A 30, 60, 90. I will label the parts of that triangle. What is the radius all of the time? 1. If you can't come up with the radius, you're not trying hard enough. Now, which side is shorter, the vertical side or the horizontal side? The vertical side, it's across from the 30, so it's going to be smaller. What do we do to get the shortest side? What do we do with that 1 to get the shortest side? Divide it by 2, so we get a half. Very good. What do we do with the shorter side to come up with the longer leg? We multiply it by square root of 3. You have the square root of 3 over 1 times 1 over 2, which is the square root of 3 over 2. We have now come up with enough information to be able to give our terminal point. What is the x value of our terminal point? Square root of 3 over 2. What is the y value of our terminal point? 1/2. So for your assignment today, you'll be finding the terminal point. And then you're going to go one step further. You're going to identify the sine of theta, the cosine of theta, and the tangent of theta. Is sine the x value, the y value, x over y, y over x? What is it? Sine is the y value. So what is the sine of 30 degrees? It is 1/2. How about the cosine of 30 degrees, or pi over 6? Square root of 3 over 2. And what would the tangent value be? How would I figure that out? You take the square root of 3 over 2 and you divide it by a half. Oh no, I can't have a fraction over a fraction. How do I divide two fractions? I take that 1/2 and I multiply by the reciprocal. What's the reciprocal of 1/2? Okay, so I'm going to simplify that. Square root of 3 over 2 times 2 over 1. What happens to 2's? They cancel, and I end up with just the square root of 3. What do you think? Not too bad, huh? Let's try another one. Instead of theta is equal to pi over 4, let's do theta is equal to 3 pi over 4, okay? 3 pi over 4. First step is I'm going to convert it to degrees. What do I multiply by to convert it to degrees? Yep, 3 pi over 4 times 180 over pi. Pi's cancel. 180 divided by 4 is 45 times 3 is 135. Which quadrant will that put me in? Second quadrant. How many degrees from 180 will I be? 135. How many degrees from 180? 45. So I have a special triangle. A 45, 45, 90 triangle. You can see my 135 degree angle right there, and we need to locate that terminal point. In order to do so, I construct a right triangle. What is always the radius? 1. If we're given the radius, how do we get the side? We divide by square root of 2. Remember this, folks? If we had this, if this was 3 and this was 3, then this would be 3 roots of 2, right? So if you want to go from the radius back, you got to divide by the square root of 2. So you should get used to these numbers, but I have 1 divided by the square root of 2. Can you leave the square root of 2 in the denominator? How do you get rid of it? Multiply the top and bottom by the root of 2, and you get the root of 2 over 2. In a 45, 45, 90, are the lengths the same? So that's the square root of 2 over 2 as well. So what's my horizontal distance? Negative root of 2 over 2, because the x value is negative, and the y value will be positive, root of 2 over 2. Once I have calculated the x and the y, then I can find my sine, my cosine, and my tangent. Which value is sine? The y value. So it's the square root of 2 over 2. What about cosine? So negative root of 2 over 2. And tangent, I have to take y and divide it by x. Instead of dividing, I multiply by the reciprocal. What happens? 2's cancel. Root of 2's cancel. What are you left with? Negative 1. Which is pretty good. We figured out what your calculator has. If you were to take the tangent of 135 degrees, you get negative 1. Okay? Now, if we change that just a little bit and we go the tangent of, instead of 135, say you did like 125, I can't tell you how to come up with that. That's a whole lot different and a lot more difficult, okay? All right? So we're just talking about very special values here. Would you like a super easy one? Or do you want a super difficult one? I'll give you a choice. Okay, let's do the easy one. Pi over 2. How many degrees is that? 90. You multiply by 180, divide it by pi, and that should be 90 degrees. Hopefully many of you were able to calculate that without actually having to use the formula. Hopefully you're getting good at converting degrees to radians. So I will draw my circle, and I'll draw my angle, 90 degrees. Sweet. Now at this point, a lot of people want to draw a triangle. Don't draw a triangle. you know the point that it goes through. If it's on one of the axes, you know the point it goes through. What point does it go through? 0, 1. So what's sine equal to? 1. What's cosine? 0. Tangent would be 1 divided by 0. Can you divide by 0? You can't divide by 0, so you write undefined. You want another super easy one? Let's try theta is 0. 0 radians is the same as how many degrees? 0 degrees. You might want to draw a triangle. Don't draw a triangle. It's on the axis, and you know that it goes through that spot. What is that coordinate? 1, 0. So we have the sine of 0. Instead of theta, I'll actually write the angle this time, the cosine of 0, and the tangent of 0. Whoop. So whether you write theta or the actual angle, it's the same thing. So what's sine? Cosine? Tangent. 0 divided by 1 is 0. You ever wonder how they came up with those names, sine, cosine, and tangent? I did. I had a paper on it in college. That length is the, this is what refers to as sine, right? This length right here, the y value. Do you know what it's called if you stretch something all the way from one side of the circle over the other, but it's not in the middle? It's called a chord. So they came up with this term sine. It meant half of a chord. It got translated from the Babylonian language to the Greek language. It got translated from the Greek language to the Arabic language. And then once it was in the Arabic language, when they translated it back, they mistranslated it. And they translated it to mean nasal passage. So when they translate it into Latin, it was supposed to mean half chord. They translated it as sinus, or your nasal passage. So it's not actually supposed to mean your nasal passage, but it's supposed to mean half chord. Just in case you want to know. I wrote a 10-page paper if you want to read it. Oh, if I gave you extra credit. No, you don't want that. That's what you're doing today, folks. Okay, we'll do one last one. 2 pi over 3. Without using the formula, 2 pi over 3, how many degrees? 120. Very good. You know that pi over 3 is 60 because you did a good job memorizing, and it's 2 of those. So it's 120. So how many degrees, which quadrant are you going to be in? Second quadrant. How many degrees short of 180? So you can see you have a 30, 60, 90 triangle. I want to know that point. What's the radius 100% of the time? What's going to be the shortest side right here? And this side? Multiply by the square root of 3, get square root of 3 over 2. If you guys haven't figured this out yet, you're always coming up with values of 0, 1/2, root of 2 over 2, and root of 3 over 2, and 1. Sometimes they're positive, sometimes there's negative, but those are your only choices. So that is an xy coordinate. What's the x coordinate? What's your horizontal length? And we'll call it negative because it's on the other side of the y-axis. And my y value is root of 3 over 2. So therefore, the sine of 2 pi over 3, the cosine of 2 pi over 3, and the tangent of 2 pi over 3. Those are all values that we can find. What's the sine of 2 pi over 3 going to be? Square root of 3 over 2. What's the cosine going to be? And the tangent? You have to take square root of 3 over 2 and divide it by negative 1/2. Instead of divided by negative 1/2, multiply by reciprocal. See the 2's cancel, you end up with negative root of 3. Guys, can we flip back to your first problem? I think we made a mistake. I'm sorry about that, but I'm guessing we didn't come up with the right value. So we had, what did we come up with for your terminal point? 1/2. So you don't have to write anything different now until we come up with something different. But just to be clear, then sine of theta would be 1/2. Did we get that? Cosine of theta would be square root of 3 over 2. Did we get that? Then tangent of theta would be equal to the y value divided by the x value. Did we do that backwards? My bad, sorry. I appreciate that. Every once in a while somebody will say, if our teacher doesn't know how to do this, how are we supposed to know how to do it? It's like, wow. Guess you had a mistake-free day and never did anything wrong. Okay, got it. Okay, so I multiply by 2 over the root of 3. You can see the 2's go away, but I end up with 1 over the root of 3. Can you leave that square root in the denominator? So what do you multiply by? And you get the root of 3 then over 3. So sorry about that, but yeah. I was like, I should have put an example on there. I was like, where did it go? So I figure I missed it from the very first one. Hey, that's all I got, folks. You got 20 minutes to work on this assignment. Is this doable? Okay, let's see if we can get one. Okay, get a few problems done. Let's get it right.